I think it's very important now to talk about your book and to talk about the history of what Black America has been. I do think an important thing that I know you probably know very well is that when you think about the civil rights movement and you think about what was that I would say, seminal moment where it didn't become a dog whistle anymore. It became, we're going full in on this. For those people who've never heard Ronald Reagan's speech at the 1964 Republican Convention, I highly recommend you listen to it, because that is essentially when the fire was stoked. And it's been that way for, I guess, close to 60 years now. And that's a long time. That's 2 generations, but it's pretty significant. But I would love for you to talk about all the machinations that have taken place, like you said, with the exception of the, no pun intended, the Addams family, all of the founding fathers, and obviously leading up to, I guess, President Fillmore, again, of course, somebody who's from the North, everybody was a slave owner, and some of them were horrific advocates of slavery. Probably no one was a more horrific advocate for slavery than Andrew Jackson, who, of course, has one of the most checkered presidencies in our history, because there were things he did that were good, and then, of course, there were things that he did were just downright crimes against humanity. There's no way of getting around it. So obviously would love for you to, start from the beginning. And, this is a lesson. This is a lesson for all of us to really understand, how we come to the present day and understanding the Black agenda.
Yes. Well, the racism is the issue. Anti-Black racism in particular is one of the things that keeps people divided, that keeps many white people from fighting for their rights, from fighting for justice. As I said, the first 10 of the first 12 presidents were slaveholders. George Washington, as an example, the first capital was New York. Washington was inaugurated in New York City. Then they moved it further south to Philadelphia. Then they moved it south further again and built a new city on a swamp. Now, why do you need to build a new city? It's very simple. You have to have a city that's squeezed in between Maryland and Virginia, safely within those states that depended on slave holding. Washington had a problem in Philadelphia. There was a law there that any enslaved person who was in Pennsylvania for more than 6 months could sue for their freedom. So what did Washington do? With he and Martha owned more than 200 people, he made sure none of them stayed in the state for 6 months. So he rotated them. So he'd have servants in Philly for a certain number of months, send them back to Mount Vernon to make sure that none of them could sue for their freedom. One young woman managed to escape. He and his wife managed to escape all the way to New Hampshire. They went to great lengths to try to get her back. And that is the story over and over again. But slaveholding was the route to wealth and influence. So it's not coincidental that these prominent people were slaveholders. Now, Andrew Jackson, people ask me who I think the worst president was. I always say Andrew Jackson. He was the one who ethnically cleansed the Southeast of the indigenous people to make sure that the plantation economy took hold there. So there's a Jacksonville, Florida, and a Jackson, Mississippi, and a Jackson wherever the hell else to celebrate this genocide there. And he's on the $20 bill, and people, Harriet Tubman to replace him. I don't think Harriet Tubman's honored by being on the money, frankly. But
I'm not big on people on money. I said that before. I just don't see why we need people on our money.
No, I don't either. But maybe if there's a revolution, we can put Harriet Tubman on the money. But in the meantime, no. And then we have, but this issue of slavery was never fully resolved. There were all sorts of compromises the North always made to the South, by the way. And Lincoln becomes president, and the Republican Party was founded to stop the spread of slavery, not to be abolitionists. But Lincoln his hand was forced when enslaved people, always fled to Union lines, always supported the Union, and it became a war against slavery. Although he never gave up his dream of this being an all-white country and always hoped to send Black people away and keep America all white. So I say that just to point out the difficulties in mobilizing people now, because we have this history then of the Jim Crow racists. We have the Woodrow Wilson. He was another one. I'd put him at the top of the very.
He always does too. He always says that.
The last, but not to the floor is yours, but I would.
He has to geek out.
I would implore people to look at the election of 1912 and not just the presidential election. What happened to Bernie Sanders, particularly against Hillary Clinton, happened to Teddy Roosevelt against William Howard Taft in 1912 during the Republican primary. That is listen, for me, and you would, I don't know where he stands on your list of presidents.
Oh, she's got a list. The whole book is a list.
Teddy's my favorite president.
He loves Teddy Roosevelt.
Teddy is actually the first president to actually have a black man at the White House for dinner. Very important.
How big of him?
Well, I mean, considering.
All right, no. You can't put it out there. Now she's going to tell you the truth. Now tell him the truth about Teddy.
By inviting Booker T. Washington to dinner, unfortunately, he reacted, as often happens, by becoming more racist himself. And he, what is the word for, court-martialed a unit of black soldiers who were falsely accused of murder, but didn't make the announcement until after Election Day, because at the time, black people were Republicans. And so those black men in the North who could vote, voted Republican and helped the Republicans in that congressional race. So that's where Roosevelt becomes problematic. And his announcement that he wouldn't run again, he sort of messed things up himself. But at any rate, so Woodrow Wilson, it was a three-way race between Taft and Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson. Black people were angry with Roosevelt because of what he did in 1906 with this black regiment. And some of them went out on a limb and endorsed this Democrat Woodrow Wilson, only to put this arch segregationist in the White House who screamed birth of a nation, among other things, who segregated the federal workforce, among other things. So it's a litany of black people, and this is where self-determination comes in, every 4 years, trying to figure out who's the best or who's just the least worst. And we end up now with this situation where black people are the poorest in the country, half of the people in jail are black, we're most likely to be living low-wage workers. By every measure, we're doing very badly, lost much of the little bit of wealth we had during the 2008 recession, haven't gotten it back yet. And this is what we get for trying to choose between who's going to be least bad for us. And that is why we need to have self-determination. That is why we have to go outside of the bounds of electoral politics in order to improve our lot in this country.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.